Welcome to the Porsche Club Insider, your one stop for all things Porsche and PCA. Here's your host, Vu Gwyn, and the Insider crew.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 118. If you notice, we are at a larger table, a more luxurious table.
About 6 times the size of our table.
It's because we took the show on the road. We are at Delamar Hotel in Greenwich, Connecticut, home of the Greenwich Concours d'Elegance. And, of course, I have Manny and Damon, but we have our special guest today, McKeel Hagerty. Welcome to Podcast PCA Insider.
All right, honor to be with you guys.
So, what are we doing this weekend?
Well, we're going to talk about cars, right? No, we have one of the coolest car events in the U.S. is the Greenwich Concours d'Elegance. This is an historic event out here. It's been going on for decades, and it takes place in this really cool park right down in the middle of the marina here in Greenwich. It's kind of one of those unusual 2-day concours where you have sort of one day kind of a certain theme of stuff. That's kind of day one, Concours de Sport, so sportier cars, a lot more like the Porsche crowd, quite honestly. And then we have the Concours d'Elegance, which is big, a lot more vintage cars, but a really great piece of why I'm proud, and you know, you guys are well aware, is one of the great Porsche collectors of all time. Stephen Harris is our Grand Marshal this year, and Stephen kind of has this very two-part car collection. He has his RS collection, which is pretty modern. It's like this incredible collection of Skittles in his garage out in Palm Springs. And then he has one of the best 4-cam Porsche collections in the world that's back here, back east. And so we'll be featuring the 4-cam little parade of more 4-cam speedsters than any one human being should be allowed to.
Wow.
So super excited to celebrate with Stephen and celebrate his car collection.
I remember, I think last year or the year before, you had a big display at the Saratoga Auto Museum of his RSs. So
Yes.
Yeah, it's always a treat to see everything in one place, or at least because he only had one Carrera Speedster at Amelia Island, and that got a lot of looks. So
Yep. He has a very, very special collection. So we have, I think, 6 of the cars here.
Now, I know we all know that Hagerty takes care of all Mark's classic cars, and but I especially like that your eyes light up when you talk about Porsche, and it goes back to, I know, your very famous 67 911S from your childhood, and the whole automotive scene it's been in you for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of my origin story as a human being. My dad was a car guy anyway, like long before I was born, you know, kind of born in Detroit, that kind of went with in the water in Michigan where I grew up. And we were kind of a Ford family, strangely. And I've often thought back, and I've talked to my sister a lot about this, what was the bridge to Porsche? Because they were kind of, my older sister had and restored with my dad when she was also a teenager, a 356B, 1960 356B that she still has, and she's 9 years older than I am. And then we restored my 67S when I was 13, 14, 15. Took a couple years to get that job done. But we actually think, when I kind of go back on it, like, it was so unusual for people where I came from to be into, you know, foreign cars, not American muscle, not American classics. But I think it was because, you know, we had a number of Volkswagens in the family. We were just like, there were, you know, aunts and uncles, and people had different Volkswagen Beetles. They had that hatchback. Remember the really wild hatchback from back in the day? And it kind of, I think, just sort of got everybody used to the fact that, okay, maybe there's a different place for the engine to be in the car than just up front, and Porsches were going to be okay. And then we just got rabid into Porsche collecting after my car, because we had lots of different Porsches during my upbringing. And because my dad was a real do-it-yourselfer, you know, we just worked on them. That was the thing we did. I mean, I think I've had the engine out of my sister's 356 a half a dozen times, you know, working on various things. And that was just how I grew up, just working on cars, working on Porsches.
So did it sway your dad to move away, or maybe add the Porsches into his own fleet?
Yeah. I mean, I think we had 6 Porsches at one point when he was, you know, kind of really into it at that moment. And I remember we had this really cool gray market 930 76. We had a 912E, which was a funny thing. I'll never forget the day he brought that. His only new Porsche my dad ever bought was a 76 912E, and my dad was colorblind. And he came home.
Something in common with Mr.
Well,
Allman.
he came home and he's like, and my mom's name was Louise, like, Louise, you will not believe the deal I got in this brand new Porsche. And we came out, and it was, to this day, I don't know actually what they called the color, like one of the worst yellows ever on a Porsche. It was kind of like this weird mustard yellow. And then it had an orange.
That's my favorite color.
Yeah. And then this kind of orange and plaid interior. And, now they're super cool. Like, all those colors are cooler than cool.
Right,
but
now
I remember,
listeners are yelling out the color.
yeah, of course. Well,
Comment below what color you think that is.
So mhagerty@hagerty.com. Whoever wants to send me what that color is called, because I'd be curious.
Oh, we'll find out.
All I remember is like we walk out in the driveway and we're like, oh my God, this thing is hideous. I mean, just awful. No wonder you got such a good deal.
Unique.
Well,
It's
but
the
then
same one that Bob Guyar
yeah. So, and I think the thing was cursed because, like about 2 weeks after my dad got it, my mom was getting groceries in it, and a gallon of milk spilled in the back seat, and it just ruined the car. Like the
Never
thing,
smelled
like
right
never
again,
smelled right again. And but ironically, there's an automotive journalist out west who still owns it. Found out that it was ours, and he sent me pictures of it, so I know it's out there. And now, of course, it's super cool, like super cool color.
So how do you fall into a 911S at 13 years old? Did you know what it was, or was it just something with a 911 and you realized
it was my dad's practice that, each of us kids, my two older sisters and I, got to pick a car to restore, and that was just kind of our project to work on with him until we got old enough to get our driver's license. So Tammy had my oldest sister had a Corvair Lakewood station wagon, then Tammy got the 356. And so my dad started kind of angling, okay, what's around that needs to be restored somewhere? And there was an old guy nearby our house who had two old Porsches sitting outside. They were literally rusting into the ground. And one was a 66 912. And then next to that, on like literally sitting on the ground, was the 67S. And it took us, we started going out there when I was 11 to try to convince the guy to sell them to us. And it was like all of a sudden he called like a couple weeks after my 13th birthday and said, come get them. Just come get them.
Wow.
And so I have the pictures of us digging it out of the snowbank in the middle of Michigan winter. We got both of them for $1,000.
Oh.
Yeah. And he threw in a wooden boat for free because we were in a wooden boat.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the S was that. And that's when people hear, oh, you got a 67S at 13 years old, you must have come from a really wealthy family. It's like, no, it's $500, and I mowed lawns to pay for the car and pay my dad back, and then buy parts for it as we slowly restored it. And it was a really cheap, on-the-fly kind of restoration, parts from Stoddard's back in the day. Is that all I remember is the car was $500, and the left rear tail light that I had to buy because it was really rusted out was $800. So the tail light cost more than the car.
They were still expensive.
And it was still expensive. Yeah. So
how old were you when the car was completed?
about 15.
About 15.
So yeah,
Okay.
I got to drive it on my driving permit, and then I drove it through high school. And I grew up in Northern Michigan, as I mentioned. Went to college in Southern California, which you saw a lot more of foreign cars, sports cars kind of thing. And my parents would not let me take it out there. And I was kept trying to convince my dad, like, let me bring the car out. It'd be awesome to have out here. And he always just said, you don't want that out there. You're going to have problems with it. And I'm like, Dad, I know every nut and bolt on this thing. I know every quirk it has. It's no problem for me to have it. And he never let me take it out there. But a few years ago, because the third life of this car after it was properly restored a few years back, is that I now take it around the country to the roads I always dreamed of driving it on. And so one of them was I took it back to my college campus in Southern California and drove it all around Malibu and up Highway 1 and, kind of all those dream drives I wish I could have done with it. It's now living a new life.
So when you first restored it, did you even know anything about its history? Like we often refer to car decks and how the car was born. Did you restore it to that level, or did you just, I liked a certain color and decided to paint it this color?
Yeah, it was a regret I had when I restored it. My car was red. It was originally red. When I dug it out of the snowbank, it was kind of like pink color, rust pink, rusty red pink. I painted it black, and it was because when there was just something wrong. There was something in my car person sense that it felt like a red Porsche wasn't the right color for the car.
I think we've all gone through a black car phase.
Right.
Yeah,
and so I painted black. It was black until I re-restored it and I put it back to the original red, and it's what it should be. I did, of course, like everybody did, kind of tune the motor when I was doing that restoration and put, bigger everything in it just to make it work a little bit better. And it's not, I wasn't going to race the car or anything like that. It's just, it felt like 2 liters was not quite enough. And so it's a breathed on, 67S. But I would say, like, when people ask me the question, I have a lot of cars now. What's your favorite car? And I said, well, it's a completely unfair question for me because my favorite car is my 67S.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, by the way, the old guy I bought it from, he died a few years after I restored the car, and like I drove it in his funeral procession. And I tell my kids, you must drive this in my funeral procession after I'm gone. So that car will be with me forever, regardless of what other
Part of
cars I
family.
have. It's just part of my life. And so the real question is not what's my favorite car, is what's my second favorite.
Yeah.
And that's whatever is coming next, of course, because I love cars.
Yeah.
So I heard a podcast interview where you actually got into the business, or your father started a business with antique boats.
Yes.
Not cars.
Yeah, boats. We were a kind of a vintage car and a vintage boat family, and when they decided to get into a business around the space, there were already a lot of people insuring, a number of companies that insured collector cars, classic cars, as we used to call them. So they got in the wooden boat business first. So that was the very first thing, and it kind of taught us how to build the business, how to interact with clients that way. But it was actually our boat customers who convinced us to go into the car insurance market, because there were a lot of people who had vintage boats, also had cars. And of course, we did like the dumb entrepreneur thing and like, yeah, sure, no problem. We'll go into car insurance. And
How hard could it be?
how hard can this be? And we discovered like really hard, boat insurance is super easy. Car insurance is pretty hard from a regulatory and process standpoint. So we stumbled into the car world. And all of us worked in it. My mom and dad really started that business together, and then my sisters and I all worked in it at one point or another. And it's pretty hard to imagine that we just are celebrating our 40th anniversary.
Our next thing is
That's
congratulations.
just thank you. It's amazing. It's just amazing.
But it's amazing that I was telling them on the way up, I said, you're second generation.
Yeah.
And I said, I think statistically, second generation, 50% of the businesses fail.
Yes.
But it seems like Hagerty is going up.
Yeah.
I'm sure your father would have been incredibly proud.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is
Usually
how
the
much it's
second
grown.
generation doesn't make it 100 times bigger than the
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Trying to
and that
ride
was
on the success of the first.
Yeah, my dad, he was not a corporate guy. Like he would not only, I'm sure he could have done what I do, but he would just not have liked it at all. Like, it's just way too many meetings, way too many sport coats, way too much entertaining. But he would have loved it. He would have absolutely loved it. My mom worked in the business a lot longer than my dad and was our CEO for a while when I first came back in the 90s. And she passed a couple months ago. She was very proud of how far it had gone, but it's like just unimaginably large in comparison to what they ever envisioned.
Yeah. Well, the thing about becoming a larger organization, representing so many clients, is the weight that's on your shoulders, and becoming the face of the car collector insurance group. Like, how does one prepare for that? And
I always keep the one thing in front of me, like the core reason this whole thing works. And, I just grew up this way, is that my mom would always say, people take good care of their toys. And, when you have something that you like, before we started recording, we were talking about Porsche bicycles. Mm-hmm. So, somebody who's into Porsches and has Porsche bicycles, like you care for it a little bit differently than you would something else. And it's just that core concept of care and kind of the love of the thing is always in the center of my mind. And when you just kind of keep that in front of you and you see people who love cars and vehicles and trucks and the stuff, all the various types of things we're into, it's kind of easy, because then you just say, like, okay, I know I'm with my people. I know we're talking to people that are like us, and you just kind of go for that.
now, I'm not going to buy the sense of it's easy, because I know it's not easy, and I admire you and how strategic you are with things. At what point did you, because you could have, as Manny said, second generations either ride the coattails of the first generation, or they just look at what has been done in the past and just kind of keep that same even keel.
Yep.
At what point did you go, I want to take it to the next level. I want to do a little bit more. I want to take care of this community. That's not easy.
Yeah. So I had this, so I was in grad school and I'd already kind of worked in the summers in the business in the 90s. So I was working on my doctorate in philosophy. I'd already been an entrepreneur when I was young. I was into business, but I really thought I wanted to be a professor. And so I remember I was literally sitting in this class on Plato's Republic, this really big, long, complicated book, and we were reading it in Greek. And all of a sudden I read,
As I said earlier, not easy.
And I wrote this note, and I said, because I was kind of responsible for the marketing of the business even then, and I remember thinking, because there was always this challenge, like insurance is just not fun to talk about. There's not a listener here that loves talking about insurance.
A lot of jokes about it.
They love talking about cars. They don't love talking about insurance. The insurance is an afterthought. It's a gotta have. It's almost like a tax, right?
Yeah.
And I just suddenly realized, like, yeah, but what if we just treated it more like a community and a club model instead of selling a product model, and just created like a big club? And I literally wrote that down in my notebook that I was trying to grind through this section in Greek, like turn it into a club, like turn Hagerty into a club. And I did something I've never done in my life because I was a pretty good student, really dedicated. I closed my notebook. I got up. I left the classroom in the middle of class, and I went home, told my wife we're moving back to Michigan that night. And 2 weeks later, I was back in Michigan full-time in the business, dropped out. And that was the insight, which is don't talk about insurance, talk about cars, make it a community. And it was kind of way beyond the vision that my family ever had for it. But it's like we've just been riding that idea. You know, people take headgear of their toys, treat it like a community. And I think so, like I always go to that, like, what's the core insight? And then how far do you take that? And so that was kind of the moment, I think. That was it. And I was an entrepreneur, but I didn't have like some big finance background, or I didn't have, I didn't do years of M&A deals for some investment bank. I had none of that. It was always just, let's build this business to what it needed to be.
Yeah, and there's a lot of similarities in PCA where, people that aren't close to the club but try to quote unquote help out, and they said, there's a Porsche, you should go directly to them and make the sell and tell them all about PCA. And we do in a way, but we don't do it that way. Like we want to show people, and why we're involved with you is how to have fun with our cars and do all the different things that we know we enjoy as enthusiasts. And we hope that people will look at us and go, they're having a lot of fun, I want to be a part of them. And then they're going to get the whole insurance thing once they get part of the group, right? And so I certainly appreciate that, and I appreciate how you've taken that, because it's hard to make people want to think more about insurance, but they always want to talk about having fun, especially with their cars.
Well, and let's give you full credit. Like if when you all come on my podcast, which I don't have one, but let's just imagine, it's the most successful car club in the United States, period.
In the world, actually. But...
In the world. Okay, in the world. Well, it's the most successful car club in the world. It really is. And remember, there was like periods of time where it was sort of like not that way. Because I've been a PCA member since 1987.
Yes. There's been highs and
wow,
lows.
2 years more than I am.
Yeah.
Wow.
Highs and lows.
Yeah, well, but everybody went through that, right? Yeah. But once PCA found its gear and figured out what it needed to be and how to do it right and get a revenue model that worked, like, it's amazing. Like, it's a great success story, because I had, been very public about how a lot of smaller car clubs had kind of been dying off. And in fact, if you looked at, the statistics of people joining car clubs, it was like declining.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like pretty significantly declining. And I think, you had the benefit of, one, Porsches are awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Two, they build enough of them in general and sell enough of them that it's like not like, you're not the like Lancia group, which is super dedicated, but there just aren't very many.
There's
of them,
not enough.
right? Not enough of them to do national things. And, now the number of times when I'm in Napa or wherever, Napa Valley, and all of a sudden, like, in drives 8 Porsches, and then, I'm like, I bet this is a chapter of PCA just on a tour of Napa Valley, having a good time. And sure enough, that's what they're. I mean, it's a great success story.
We
So
say
I feel like Hagerty and PCA, we've grown up together.
Well, it's passion. I mean, you're trying to sell insurance and capture that passion because in the event of a fire, I'm going to get the family out, but I also have a plan to get my cars out. And really, you want a client like that, right? That's going to take care of their cars. Is because
he said it in that order because someone might be listening.
That's right, man. I think my wife listens to our podcast.
Yeah, first thing.
But
The family drives in the other car.
am I going to get my Suburban out? No, but I will get the Porsches out of the garage before they catch on fire, and that's all the passion. And we capture that with PCA. It is so easy because they've already bought the car, and usually it's a dream car for people. And they have the car, and you tell them, and by the way, there's a whole community of people just as crazy as you are. And we get together every weekend, and we do drives, we do tech sessions, we do all this stuff. And they're just thrilled. And so they don't want to buy another make of car because they look and they say, well, that club doesn't do anything. Or they do something once a year. Or my PCA friends are doing stuff every weekend.
Oh, it's really a great community. And, for me, Porsches have been part of my life. I've had a number of different Porsches. The really fun kind of new journey for me has been like two different poles in the Porsche world. So I have a Taycan Turbo S. So I'm year 2 with that, and that thing is just weapons grade, crazy cool. And then I have 2 356s. So my sister had her 356, and I always remembered so fondly driving that car. And I was admired speedsters and wanted to own one. And, of course, you will get a kick out of this. I bought my Speedster, which is this very unusual color of orange. There were very few of these made. And I bought it over FaceTime during COVID when everybody thought they were going to die alone at home in their house. It's terracotta.
It is terracotta.
Yes. And
when you said that, I'm like, it's gotta be.
Yes. But ironically, the guy who was in this garage all masked up and everybody was freaked out and showing me this thing on FaceTime, I'm like, can't wait. But is the car red? Oh, yeah, because you couldn't see. It was shadowy. And then he explained, I'm like, oh, that's my Speedster. It's got to figure it out. But all of a sudden, in the background, I'm like, hey, what's the white thing in the background right behind it? And so that is a 62 Deteran Roadster, which is rare than a Speedster, convertible D. Yeah. So I ended up, that was very far from, it was a twofer. Very far from, buy one, get one. It was very, very far from that. It was sort of like buy two, pay three times. Yeah. So I ended up, that was a very, very good day. So I'm kind of back, really also enjoying the world of driving 4-cylinder early Porsches, and I love it. Super fun.
Going back to the Taycan, that is one of the most polarizing subjects, at least in the Porsche world, is the 2 letters EV. And either you have people that really like it or people that think it's the end of the world when it comes to the car hobby. If we want to get heavy comments, we just talk about EV.
Oh, okay.
And it elicits a lot of passion, like I said, positive, negative. It's
funny because people... I want to say it's expected, but they kind of roll into the whole politics of it all of EV. But the way I look at it is really the performance and the maintenance and the drive, and not people accuse us of possibly sounding like Porsche fans all the time.
Porsche's paying us,
so that Porsche's paying, and which they're not.
We would take the money. If they're not.
No, we wouldn't. No, we wouldn't. But Porsche still injects that Porsche DNA in every car they make, in every segment, and every vehicle that's going to come across that line. That's why we're so fortunate to be in the position that we're in, because you talked about other car clubs. Some of those car makers have really been watered down over the years, but Porsche has, to me, they've stayed true to what they've been in the past. They're still passionate about what they make, and they're making in their segment the sportiest car. Or the sportiest SUV.
I got to drive the Taycan Turbo GT.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
wow.
And it's, you don't even think...
How's your neck? Can you hold your head up?
You don't even think it's an electric car.
Yeah.
And the fact, I spoke about the last podcast, and I got some grief about that, yes, it's electric, but you still hear everything. The motor, you hear the sound of the tires, you hear wind noise and everything. It's still very engaging. It's not the cone of silence where you're like playing a video game on mute. It's I mean, my mind was elsewhere other than am I hearing the engine? It was can I stop from the speeds that I'm heading into turn one? It was an incredible car, but yeah, it's how do you think the EV world.
Go ahead, you can ask. Yeah. Bring it out.
How do you think the EV world's going to be with the collector car world? Are EVs going to ever become collectible?
For sure, they already are. And I don't approach this. I have a hard time going to the religious zeal that people have about it because I have a lot of internal combustion engine cars. This is my first electric car. And the thing's amazing. I absolutely love it, and it drives more like a Porsche and not like some sort of electronic appliance.
Yeah.
Right, like an appliance. And I love it. I love the look, and people think it's really cool. And my view is I'm not afraid of it, and I don't find anybody who says, "Oh, gee, you've gone over to the other side." I'm like, I have a lot of internal combustion cars,
way more.
And by the way, and if you'd like to go in something like really stupid, you should go for a ride in our 1903 Knox with 22 horsepower and see what something that really clatters and makes a bunch of rattly noises. I like all kinds of cars, and this is just one of them. I like steam cars. Do people sit there and say, "Oh, well," I always say, "Well, what do you think about external combustion engine cars?"
Yeah,
steam cars.
right.
So I like those
and
too.
You can still drive your steam car on the street. It's still street legal, right?
Of course.
And that's what I tell people. I go, if I see Model Ts at Cars and Coffee that these people drive to the Cars and Coffee, then these gas cars are going to be around for a long while. Of course. They're not going to be, I don't think, legislated out. They're not going to disappear. I think you're going to see the non-collector cars eventually probably get smashed and recycled, but the collector cars are always going to be around because people have taken care of them. And emission-wise, they're not driving it every day. So,
I just think, is there a scenario, though, where eventually, you pay extra for a license or gasoline costs more than $4 a gallon, like it's $10 a gallon in the UK, and it's not a problem? People have absorbed that kind of cost. Yeah, I mean, I think they're not going away. Internal combustion cars are not going away. Anything like any of our lifetimes, but to just sort of create this weird divide with EVs, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
And I guess I kind of say this, so I have 3 daughters ranging from 11 to 28 years old. They all drive, well, not all of our cars. I have a couple of cars that are either too scary or too complicated for them to drive. But let's just not even imagine it's them. It's grandchildren that I don't have. And if it's like, gee, Dad, the 911's a little different. They would not be allowed to do this. But if they said,
choosing his words carefully in case
but if they said
against him later.
But if they say, gee, I'd really love the Aston Martin, but instead of crushing it, the only way they're ever going to drive it or want to own it or keep it in the family is if it was electrified. I'd say put the engine on a stand in the garage and drive the car in an electric way. But for God's sake, don't crush that beautiful body.
Yeah. I don't think it's even going to get to that point. I mean, I look at horses. Yeah. Look how popular horses were. And now they say there's more horses than there was in the 1800s. Yeah. And people still take horses out. And whenever people see horses, they always run up to the fence. They look at them. They admire them. Mm-hmm. It's going to be the same way with I
agree. I'm not troubled. I'm not troubled by it either way. So to me, they're already a really interesting. Well, you think at the really, really high end of all electric cars. So obviously a Taycan Turbo S, that's not going away. You think of a Rimac, or you think of some of these kind of cars, they're permanently part of the automotive world. So get used to it. Yeah. And we insure a bunch of Tesla Roadsters, a bunch of the early ones. That was the first electric car I ever drove, back in the early day. And I remember, wow, really, really fast golf cart.
We just took the engine out of his 996, and I swear every step of the way, I'm like, all this is doing is convincing me that electric cars are the way to go. Because there was
a million steps that I had to go through.
We weren't fixing anything. This was all preventive maintenance we were doing to the car. And I always tell the story at our event Tech Tactics in the training center for Porsche. They had a GT2 RS engine, beautiful work of art.
Yes.
The turbos, but you're looking at the turbos, all these oil lines, coolant lines, vacuum lines, and then they had the most unsexy looking Taycan Turbo S motor. Which is nothing attractive about it at all except one plug. and the guys there cannot remember when they had to replace an electric motor. Batteries, yes, they've replaced the batteries, but the motor itself, they've never had to open up. Because I said, was there a training session on how to fix the motor? And he said, no. He says, because I can't remember when broke that. I'm sure he goes, I guess we just replaced it, but it's not something common. So, like he said, from a maintenance point of view, wow, it's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, it is. And, to me, it's just, I hope there are cool cars out there regardless. And I am pretty curious, though, on Porsche's, the hybrid entry here coming up for the next model year. And I'm kind of interested in that. I love
phenomenal what they've done with it.
Yeah. So,
thermal
and
recovery.
I'm not troubled by it. I think it's just fine.
Yeah. So we hinted at the future, and what I wanted to get into is, again, the splash that you've made in the industry. We're here at Greenwich for an event, and the number of events that you all have acquired. What's the game plan? What do you see in the next 10 years? And are you holding with what you have? Are looking to build more, or?
Yeah, so our event strategy is built on an event strategy that we've had for years, which is, we go to hundreds and hundreds of car events every year, usually as a sponsor.
Right. And we thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. Well, we love it. We love car events. And again, it's always trying to maintain that kind of authentic connection with an audience and with the car world. And we love supporting car events because we have this purpose as a company, which is to save driving and to fuel car culture. And it's kind of funny, like, does driving need saving? It's like, well, I want to make sure that people can go out there and drive on public roads. They can enjoy good cars with their hands on the wheel. And that purpose kind of was derived after everybody said everything's going to be autonomous and drivers are the most dangerous thing out there. I just don't believe that. And that's something we're going to fight for. But it's that fueling car culture piece that is what you need. What's going to make people want to drive and find these cars interesting 50 years from now is going to be if there's cool things to do with them and there's a social group to interact with. It's not just this solo activity of I own this thing and I'm alone in the garage or on the road. I think it's all of that other stuff. So events are important. We acquired a few different events like the Amelia Concours, the Greenwich Concours. We acquired that event group called Radwood. We have partnerships with the Concours de Lemons folks. We do a really cool event in the UK called the Festival of the Unexceptional, which is just a fantastic event. And we do a lot of tours that we create, which are kind of my favorite. I love the tour stuff. It's kind of really my favorite, even though I've been involved with a lot of these car shows. So, I could actually see us building out a lot more of the Radwood events over time because they're kind of very approachable, very affordable for people. It's kind of 80s, 90s, and
the rest of
current cars
plugged in.
Yeah, and it's got a little bit more of that kind of festival approach. You can do music, you can have all that kind of stuff, and it's not silliness. It's like real cars. They're just a little bit newer, and it's got a little bit of this more approachable feel. The Concours will maintain. Would we do more of them? Maybe, but we like the ones we have, and otherwise we'll just keep supporting the other ones. As we do.
I think you approach it similarly to PCA in the sense of we always want to honor the traditional events of PCA. That's what we're built upon. But we are also looking at creating new traditions and things that we can apply in multiple venues to get the largest bang for the buck in terms of bringing people into our fold.
Yeah.
Right.
Look, events are tough to manage and organize, and they're expensive.
Yes.
And, one thing that, I always tell people when I have a chance to talk to larger audiences is just, look, if you own a really cool car, what we hope is you'll share it with the world and recognize that, whether it's a, brand new GT3 RS kind of car or it's my Porsche Speedster, is that I hope like a little piece of your attention around the car is to bring it out and show it to people. It's not just this totally private thing in your garage that you're proud of and you earned. And so that means going to car events, and that means cleaning the cars up, and it might mean an entry fee. It might mean a shipping, a transportation fee, all these things. And I just think it's really important. And it's like, it's a little bit of an extra cost to owning a cool car, like a great Porsche. But what I hope is that people aren't discouraged by that. And they say, look, I own a cool car. I'm going to show it to the world. I want kids to like these and want to own them someday. And I mean, I know, if there weren't those few people in my life when I was a little kid who had cool cars like Porsches, I don't think I'd be as into it as I am today.
We're typically into it because we want to plant those seeds, and it could be as simple. I remember seeing a Porsche just drive by and hearing the exhaust,
the unmistakable sound of a Porsche,
right?
Yeah.
That's what you want to make for as many kids, as many people as possible.
Absolutely.
On that subject, so PCA's approach to its content, especially online, is we give it away for free. So why do we do that? Hopefully we plant a seed in a future member and Porsche owner, and they come join the club. You obviously had the club idea with Hagerty for quite a long time, and I want to say I didn't know much about Hagerty until 5 to 10 years ago when the YouTube channel and Drivers Club magazine and all that. What was the goal with stepping up the content game so high? I mean, I've got to say some of my, if not Icons, has to be one of the best series on TV right now. Yeah. What was the goal with that, and where do you see it going?
Well, I think all of you, I grew up reading car magazines. And so, at our house, we had 2 car magazines. We got Porsche Panorama and we got Road and Track. That was it. That was it. There was nothing else. And so my entire worldview was shaped by those 2 car magazines coming to the house. And so, what I discovered as I got into this much later kind of professionally is while there were hundreds of car magazines at one time, and there are a lot fewer now, is we still think that there's this important place for kind of high quality print. And then as the world becomes more digital, and more people are consuming it, you got to play in that space too. And that's both kind of print articles, which we do, the team today, it's pretty amazing. I think it's like 8,000 articles per year. Wow. It's an astonishing number. Yeah. And then the YouTube channel, which I think is 3.1 million subscribers right now, which is I think that's a pretty large number.
Yeah, pretty large.
It's pretty large.
We're making our way there. Speaking of which, if you're enjoying this, be sure to click that like button, comment, and subscribe.
It's a journey. It's a journey. We're all on the journey.
What a great segue.
But that's part of that car culture piece, which is, my only interaction with car culture was not hanging out with my dad with, 11 millimeter wrenches in my hand. It was reading, Road and Track and saying, I would just dream to go to the Geneva Motor Show someday. I remember every year when they'd show those international motor shows, wow. And
unveiling.
Eventually one day when I finally got to go, you're like, wow. Or, and with Panorama, which was, back in the day, it was like a real print mag. There weren't even a lot of photographs in the magazine sometimes, because I know what it costs to print and all of that stuff. Yeah. So I think it was just tradition, again, playing into the tradition. Part of car culture is being able to read high quality media. And so we're just going to keep doing it.
But you were the only insurance company doing this. Because none of your competitors were doing this. At one point, did you say, am I doing the right thing? Because I'm here on an island by myself and everyone else is traditional.
Every day I wonder whether oh, no. I mean, our Hagerty Drivers Club magazine is an audited CERC magazine. And it's the largest car magazine by CERC in the world. I think we just passed number 1. Wow. So we are now in that number 1 spot.
I'll give a shout out to Larry Webster. I liked him at Road and Track, and I think he's doing a phenomenal job with your magazine.
Nobody has more fun than Larry Webster. Gets to do a lot, and his team. They get to do some really cool things. And at a time when so many car, publishing companies are really shrinking. They're not doing road tests in the way that they used to. They can't do a lot of the high quality photography, so we're just doing it, and it's all part of our Hagerty Drivers Club. That was kind of the idea, and that's people can buy it without insuring with us, but it's it kind of goes hand in hand. It kind of goes hand in hand, and so it's really it's important. We think we're going to keep doing it. So I'm glad you like this show. A couple of them are just amazing.
Yeah, they are, and I just got to get in here that I may not have Hagerty Insurance right now, but I watch Hagerty and read Hagerty media every single week, probably 2 or 3 days per week, if not more.
That's great.
So,
Thank you.
We have Hagerty, by the way. So
wonderful. That's okay.
Yes.
So
we are customers.
All good.
No, but that commitment, especially that commitment early on, I feel same thing with PCA, with Porsche Panorama and the stuff that we're doing. Granted, not at the level that you have, but it has propelled us, I believe, well ahead of other car clubs, because these other car clubs didn't consider that, or just were like,
Well, look
kinda
at the quality of your magazine. I mean, it's remarkable. When most became a newsletter and then went away.
It's our crown
And
jewel
it is
that
the
we
crown
have
jewel.
to take care of it, and shout out to Rob South.
Rob's wherever
Your
wherever you
ex-employee.
wherever he is. Yes, Rob's a great friend, and
Yeah.
he's living his dream life.
That would be another episode.
Yeah, if you could just if you could just bottle his nervous energy,
Exactly.
we'd power the world.
Exactly.
we would.
You wouldn't need EVs.
Yes,
just
we
have
would.
Rob.
You just have Rob, powered by Rob.
Yeah.
So how hard is it to at PCA we have, I think this challenge is getting employees that are enthusiasts. Of course, we're even more specific because they got to be Porsche because people are calling up and they don't want to know that you know what a 911 is. They want you to know that they have a 74 mechanically injected Carrera, a European model, not a U.S. model. And so it's a lot of training on our side of our member services. So when people call up, the member services know what they're talking about.
Yes.
And so when you're running events here, you've acquired an event that was run probably by a lot of volunteers, and now it's run by your company. I don't think you can hide an event when you don't have enthusiasts. Is that like a challenge or?
It is, but you can, look, you can give people a basic level knowledge, and you just bring them into the world. And the number of people that we have on our team, we have about 1,700 team members. They, not all of them would say, "Oh, gee, I was a rabid car person," and you kind of expose them to it. And the number of them that get into it and learn to really love it is incredible. We actually have this. There's an old practice we started in house, which is anytime an employee insures a car with us, I get an email. And I know it sounds kind of wonky, but sometimes it's 2 and 3 a week. Somebody gets a new car and adds it to a policy, or a new first time gets a car that I was dreamed about. And it's like the coolest little email exchange because, my husband and I, my wife and I, my kids, we always wanted to, whatever it is. And it's just fun to share that moment with them. So you can bring people into it. The challenge is kind of to your point, 74 mechanically fuel injected car is, and that, E is Einspritz and the whole thing is, you can't demand too much expertise. You got to make sure that people always come into it with a point of view of humility. I've been a Concord judge at Pebble Beach. This is, I think, my 25th year. And it's just like the one thing I do not feel like is an expert when I walk into that room of judges, because they all know so much. And you just want to kind of learn as much as you can. And, the only thing is don't ever call it a Porsche. If you say that, you probably can't work.
That's a secret handshake, as Manny always says.
Well, any more than it's a Rolls, or any more than it's a whatever. It's like we're going to learn the proper way to speak about these things, and then recognize that the person you're speaking to owns it.
I noticed you said Lancia, so happy about that.
Yeah, so yes. Well, it's my...
Well, that's the opening... he says secret handshake, and I tell whenever we go to do events, I'll tell the host hotel, I'll say, if you want to get a good tip, if you want to get these people on your side really quick, just say Porsche. Say 2 syllables, because they're going to light up and they're going to say, "Oh, you're part of the group, or you know us," and everything is forgiven, everything changes. But they hear Porsche, you can hear them just crinkle up.
It's cringeworthy. It's cringeworthy.
It's
but that's the thing. You bring people in, make it friendly. And then one of the really cool aspects of our business is, we have this whole marketplace team now. We have an auction company, we have the digital marketplace. With that, we have about 80 automotive specialists who kind of came in and growing, who have really raised our level of car knowledge in a way that has, and we always had a lot of car expertise in various pieces, from on the sales side to claims. On the Larry Webster, all the media teams, but some of these people who work on our marketplace team, they really know their stuff, and it's super fun. So it's raised our game, and we just get to keep doing more of it.
So what other aspects? So I look at it from the outside, and I see you have media, you have registration, Motorsport Reg, you have several events. Now you have a marketplace and auction company. Yeah, you're going into online auctions. What else is there left?
That's pretty good right now. That's a good list. That's a nice list. Look, the things that we have that work best are kind of like they're a good ecosystem where they kind of feed off of each other. And part of the reason we went into the marketplace space, either live or digital, is our members, our insurance customer members, buy and sell a lot of cars. So last year, just some current numbers, last year, 2023, our customers bought and sold about 300,000 cars and either added them to insurance policies or deleted them. And that was about $14.5 billion worth of transactions.
Wow.
So when people talk about the big online auction companies or the live auction companies, look at how much transactional volume they did last year. I'm like, it doesn't even scratch the surface of how big the larger car world is.
Right.
They're important. Like, we admire a lot of those auction businesses and the marketplaces, but it's like, it's much larger than that.
There's a lot of opportunities.
A lot of opportunity. And so our view is like, if we can help more people have a good, safe, trustworthy platform to buy and sell on, and we can help deliver that, that's what we're here to do. But it's just a bigger car world than a lot of people thought. And that's our job.
That's the most popular call I get at the office. Well, after how many cars of a certain color or a certain interior did they make, is the I'm selling a car or I want to buy a car.
Right.
And how should I do that? And, they're looking for advice on, especially like selling a car, because a lot of them haven't sold a car in a long time.
Yes.
And they have, there's so many scammers on Facebook and Craigslist that they're trying as much as possible to avoid that. Our classifieds are member only, and we explain that to them. That weeds out a lot of the scammers. Not all of them, but
Yes,
it does a lot. But for a lot of people, online auctions are it's like a foreign object, or live auctions,
yes,
for that matter. So we've done a lot of shows, a lot of podcasts trying to explain what's involved with this with auctions if you want to go to that route. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities with the sale and purchase of cars.
Well, and a lot of the online platforms, which are, they're awesome. They've changed the landscape of the car world, but there are lots and lots of professionals, whether they're actually declared dealers or they're just kind of brokers, helping people win those transactions or representing other people's cars. So you have a lot of pros, professionals in those spaces. And if you're kind of a civilian car person that just wants to sell or just always dreamed of owning something, it's just, there is that, I think, that need for a little bit of caution. Not that anybody means ill intent. Some people could, but the point is just recognize that, you're entering an adult zone when you come into some of these places. Sure. It is an adult zone, and you've got to have, and if you don't absolutely know something, find somebody who does, because it's, it's scary. Think about some of those things. We talk about, like, if you really had to have a certain 911 from a certain year with a certain color, like, you better have somebody who can help you figure out what that thing was, because it may or may not be
real
as described.
As
real,
described,
yes.
And it might not be the seller that doesn't know it. They may believe 100% that they're representing the car to you correctly, but two owners before that did something, and if we often look at a car and fall in love with it very quickly.
Yes.
And you need that third party who has the expertise you were talking about earlier, that can look at that bolt and know that bolt never went there, and then dig even deeper that something's wrong with the frame, or that option should have never come with that car. As a buyer, I always gloss over that because it's so pretty.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Oh,
but
no,
you need someone.
I fall in love very
Yeah.
But there was a weird anomaly, I think, or there was a weird practice in the car world from a previous generation, and that is there were a lot of cars that sold back in the day where people sold the cars, but they kept the paperwork. Now and then you'll get these stories like, oh my gosh, I got this whole crate of all the service files and all the everything.
They didn't pass it on.
A lot of people specifically did not.
Oh.
And in fact, they kind of felt like, well, I'm not selling you the paperwork, I'm selling you the car. And I can't tell you, like, I've heard that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. Like, I bought a few pre-war classics where I bought them from a gentleman. He's like, no, I'm not giving you any of that paperwork. You don't get any of their service records, none of the restoration records, none of the old photographs.
It's not even available for you to, like, negotiate that.
Yeah,
price?
it's like, can I make some copies of it? Nope, you may not. You may buy the car.
Wow,
they do not want it, and it was not uncommon. Huh. You hear these stories of then later, like, people will come across a treasure trove of old Ferrari files, And the reason that they exist is because people refuse to sell them with the cars. And to me, it's just like, well, you bought the car, you're getting all the stuff with it. And I might keep a cool few photographs for myself.
Right.
But it was actually a generational thing. And maybe a bunch of the listeners could help explain to me why that was. But there were a lot of people that felt like, no, the car is the car, and you can buy that, and I'll sell it, and whatever, but not the paperwork. Yeah. That's mine.
Yeah, we know somebody actually who bought a pretty mint, I want to say 80s pickup truck, and it was an older man, and the son helped him sell it. Apparently, a week or two before he sold this pickup truck with low miles, beautiful vehicle, the son figured, we don't need these receipts, and like this full meticulous.
Let's get rid of that.
Threw him out.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh no!
And it's like as we all know, for like most of these cars, like it's that stuff that's the most important aspect of it.
Because at Works for Union, Works for Union judging is when I created it, it was similar to Amelia Island. Yeah. The story of the car.
Yeah.
And what the owner, and a lot of that is the records. So you see these guys pull out records from 30 years ago, and they have everything. And that's suddenly from the guy who just paid to have it restored, and the car's perfect, but no records. You got to give it to the guy who's had the car, or at least has the records from 30 years ago and can tell the whole story of the car.
Absolutely. Yeah, I bought a pre-war car, a Bentley, a couple of years ago, and I have every service record since 1928. Wow. I mean, and that was like an era when people had this like beautiful handwriting, and like every mile it was perfectly documented. And so it's just like everything you can tell, like every single piece. Yeah. It gave you a lot of confidence that you were getting a real car and that you could
it's documented.
Make the investment. It's super documented, and it's just one of the best cars. I think.
I've always been curious, like pre-war cars. I'm just not around that world. How are those cars doing in going into the future and demand, and where do you drive them? The knowledge base. How does that world? Because Porsches, you can drive, a 50,
as a regular
60s
car,
as a regular car, and hop on 95 and do your thing.
But you get them fixed too, right?
Yeah, you can get fixed, and parts are available. How is that world?
Yeah, a lot of those things you point out are probably headwinds for certain pre-war cars. I mean, and I do think, but they've actually held very strongly, and they still have remained too. You mentioned a Model T.
Yeah.
Model Ts aren't just being like scrapped in droves. Like they're still out there, and people still own them. They are challenging. Like I have a 1915 T, and so that's a crank start brass radiator car that I have to like go meditate and center myself in the garage. What's the starting procedure on this thing? And then you get the pedal weirdness because it's right foot brake and left foot high and low and reverse in the center. But I like that challenge. Not everybody does, and so I think the challenge will be, having a big and large enough generations who are willing to kind of cross that Rubicon to say like, okay, like I have a Packard that was my mother's favorite car, V12 1937 Packard. And people are like, wow, is it fun to drive? I'm like in a driving sense? No, like it's not.
It's an experience.
It's a cool experience, and it's perfectly silent and elegant. And by the way, Packards were so good. That car you could drive coast to coast and not have a single issue with it. But it's a big, heavy, 3-speed overdrive kind of beast, and it's not a sports car. It's no 356 speedster, but when you get people to drive it and they make their first shift in it and they realize, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm even driving this thing, what you hope is that magic for those people, that it lights up their eyes. So I have some concern about some of those just large amounts of pre-war production cars, the Model A's, the Model T's, the Chevrolets, that there just isn't a big enough audience other than in families to sustain, Grandpa's car collection. But we're not there yet. So we'll just wait and see.
There's also rallies like for your Bentley that will only accept certain year cars.
Oh, I bought that car for one reason and one reason only. The Bentley people are wild people. Like they really drive. I mean, they drive and in the rain and all this stuff. The old gentleman elderly gentleman I bought it from in the UK. I'd never seen pictures. There were no pictures of it with the top up. And I called him, and he was quite elderly. And I'm like, sir, I'm not asking you to put the top up. I'm just asking, does it have a top? And he said, I've owned it 27 years and I don't know. He said, over here in the UK, when we drive, and it's rainy, we go out and drive in the rain.
Oh, yeah.
We put on our raincoats and we drive in the rain. And okay, here we go. This is
I like that mentality.
Yeah, why not? Right. Well, you're not made of sugar. The car isn't made of sugar either. It'll be fine. Yeah, it just gets wet. Yeah. So, yeah.
We also have a huge initiative in PCA. We often talk about the 6 generations that we have to appeal to. Those that started with the club in 1955 to ones that are about to get their driver's license and be able to drive a Porsche. Your efforts in that area and how similar it is to what we're doing here in PCA.
Well, thank you. It's again, I think, in keeping with that idea of how do you save driving and preserve car culture, the one thing that I can tell everybody listening is it's not going to, you can decide whether or not you think it's worthy of saving. It's our mantra, but I think it should be all of ours in a weird way, is that it won't save itself. And there is no like mysterious nonprofit that's going to swoop in and make this all better. So it's going to take a little bit of effort out of any kind of decent organization to put a little bit into keeping the next generation with their hands on the wheel and wanting to like these things. So, like I mentioned, you guys producing high quality content, us producing high quality content, that's a piece of it. Video games are an important part of this world. So, like it's important, for example, that the car companies work with the video game maker. You got to kind of keep all the dots together.
Movies, like back in the 80s. So
Absolutely.
many cars that are so popular today is because they were in the movie.
Yeah, but there would be no Aston Martin if, if the Broccoli's didn't put James Bond in one, right? Exactly. That was it. So like all that stuff matters. So for us, our small part in it was, we first started with youth judging programs or young judges at all these car events. And I think at our peak, we do about 75 or 80 of them a year. And we'll come in and we've actually partnered with clubs to run their young judges programs just to kind of show the club members kind of how to do it. So that's one thing. A more elaborate program we had was we call the Hagerty Driving Experience, which is to teach young people to drive manual transmissions. It's more complicated because we have a group of cars that we own that we'll just send in that are manuals of different types. But it's a little easier when you kind of go in and like you get some local club members of some club to say like, okay, I'll put my Jeep or my, you don't have to give them a Bugatti Type 35, but just let them drive some of the local cars. And then what we do is, block off a school parking lot. We kind of bring in trained instructors. It's all in cones, and I don't think we've lost a clutch yet. Since we started training those. And these are the types of things I think all of us need to do a little bit. Just put, it's like I said, if you want to own a cool car, I hope you will show it a little bit. If you want to see this play out to your grandkids, I hope you'll do a little bit to bring kids into it. And even if it's, look, I was at a collection, we're in Greenwich, Connecticut. I was in New York this morning and I was in a collection. There was like one car, with like velvet ropes around it. And there's nothing that drives me more crazy than seeing velvet ropes around a car. And by the way, it's not like some Ferrari GTO. I mean, this was just, it was a nice car, but it did not need, there was no reason for velvet ropes around this thing. We're like, oh, don't touch it. Well, good. You should just leave it here and no one should ever do anything with it. So my view is just get them out there. But, and when you see a little kid where their eyes light up when you're driving your Turbo S someplace, open the door, put them behind, let them sit in the car. Let me take a picture of you in my car. You could own one of these someday. Just show that level of enthusiasm. It's so tiny, and it just really, really works. One of my favorite stories of like car collectors doing this was an older collector named Roger Wilbanks. He had like an epic collection of pre-war cars and big hot-rodded 50s era Ferraris and all this stuff. And I'm like, sir, where did you get your enthusiasm? And he said, well, when I was a boy, I had a much older brother, 17 years older, and he took me to it wasn't the World's Fair, but it was like the State Fair or whatever in Denver, Colorado. And it was back when the big car companies would bring their, prototype wild design cars around. And it was, during the era of like the Y Job and the big Buick Fire Cat, all the crazy, wild concept cars. He's sitting on his brother's shoulders, and one of these big, wild concept cars came up, and he said, I'm going to own that car someday. And I looked at him and like a tear running down his cheek, and he said, and I do own that car.
Oh, nice.
And he said, but if I wasn't on my brother's shoulders, I couldn't have seen it. my brother didn't take me, I would have never known it if they didn't show up. Like, so it's just like those little tiny impressions. You don't know who it's going to touch. And so the good news is, I say, and you guys know it, is a lot of young people learn about cars today through video game platforms. The two platforms, Gran Turismo on Sony PlayStation and Forza on Xbox, both have really high quality depiction of cool vintage cars. We have a partnership with PlayStation, so I know it a little bit better, but they have this whole history section in the game where you can learn about cars and all the way back that Audi started as Hork and, all of that kind of thing. And, my view is, don't sit there and like thumb your nose. Why are you playing those games, kid? It's like, no, why don't you sit down next to them and play it yourself?
Exactly.
Where I always say, like, anybody who wants to get people into cars, like, if you are still working in an office somewhere and there's not one of those game consoles like in your office lunchroom, go buy one. Doesn't cost that much, and you'll keep the magic going.
They're always at our console.
We want the full motion one. Though.
Oh yeah, of course.
They're spoiled. They want full motion rig now.
You guys are spoiled.
Yeah,
you're completely spoiled.
But I agree with you. When I go to our local cars and coffee and car shows, I love to go meet people and talk about their car. And more often than not, the conversation will circle back, and they go, "Yeah, I love this, and this is what I have now." But my real man, one day I'd really like to have a Porsche and a G. Oh, I happen to have brought one. Would you like to sit in it?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be fantastic. We'd love it. And that's what I love about our community is I feel what you do, what PCA does is we are very much inclusive. We realize not everyone has the means to be in our club at the moment, but we're going to produce content and get them interested. And when they are ready, the door is going to be open for them.
That's right. It's a dream, and you're helping people dream it and live it. Yeah. So
we are at the top of the hour, so I want to anything else before I close, and hopefully for those of you that are listening, this is not our traditional format. We focused and wanted to extract the most out of you out of the hour that we had
back, because I think we'll talk for another hour.
Yeah. we can keep going.
Happy to do more. I'll come to you next time. How about we do that?
There you go. Well, folks, thank you for listening. If you aren't currently a PCA member and own a Porsche, what are you waiting for? Grab that VIN, head over to PCA.org and get yourself set up with a membership. If you're looking for that special Porsche, we have the test drive program where we will unlock resources to you and hopefully get a Porsche on your driveway or in your garage. Remember to follow our podcast Instagram page, behind the scene photos and videos, Porsche Club Insider, all one word. And of course, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. If you'd like a PCA Insider decal, podcast at PCA.org, throw us your details and we'll get a couple of decals out to you. Until next time, stay safe and we'll catch you down the road.